name is Judy Kamilhor, and I'm 56 years old. I live in Brooklyn. I was born in Queens, so I feel like I've come a long way. Both my parents grew up in Brooklyn, so it does feel like my ancestral home. And my coming out story has a lot of kind of fits and starts. It certainly didn't happen all at one time. When I was in high school, there was just kind of a buzz. I played on all the sports teams, and there was definitely a vibe going on that there was lesbian relationships and all kinds of stuff going on that I could tell was happening, but I wasn't involved in it. So it was very mysterious to me, and I kind of, was trying to figure out, well, who's a lesbian and who's having sex with whom, and which teachers are involved, and is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? I don't really know. I had a really intense crush when I was a senior on one of the sophomore women who was on my softball team, and one of our other teammates actually came out to me. She was the first one to actually come out to me, and I will never live down my response to her, which was, "Don't give up on men," which was just such a stupid thing to say. So I guess I was still kind of in denial about myself at that particular point. Looking back, I was really actually honored that she confided in me, because that really wasn't something people were doing. Like, everyone was quite secretive unless they kind of knew that you were receptive to what they were going to say. So that was high school, and at the age of 17, I went away to college in North Carolina. The first time I really realized that I was in love with a woman happened when I first started college. Her name was Louise, and she was a junior, I think. So I was a freshman. I was only 17 because I skipped a grade, so I was really quite young and away from home. And she was part of the orientation committee, and she was working on a song, I think for orientation or for some kind of event. So she was singing, and somehow I ended up helping her rehearse. And I remember writing in a journal that I am in love with her, and I just I am in love with a woman, and I just wrote it down, and it was just like this amazing thing to me, even though looking back, it's like it was just a very slow evolution, but it was not it was not out of place at all, but it was just kind of like I had to admit it to myself. So, that was sort of in my mind. I never acted on it. I never told her about it. But it was just, once I wrote that down, it's kind of like there's really no going completely back. It's like I get it. I understand. It took me a long time to be ready to really say it out loud and to act on it. I went to school in Chapel Hill. I was really happy to get away from New York. New York was actually like going bankrupt at the time I was choosing a college, so it was like, I am out of here and I don't ever want to come back. And I wanted to go someplace very different, so I chose a southern college town as opposed to a huge northern city. And I had several experiences in college, the most important of which was that I was in a class, I can't remember what it was. There was a woman in the class who drove a motorcycle, and she had a white motorcycle helmet with a red fist with a women's symbol around it, not subtle at all. And in the middle of a class, out of the blue, she winked at me, and my heart just completely stopped, like, oh my God, what's happening? And I didn't know how to respond. I was really flattered and excited, but I just had no idea how to respond. So I feel like I kind of missed an opportunity, but I did become friends with her and some of her other friends, and we hung out together for a bit. Around that time, I was part of the Association of Women Students, which was a feminist organization, and some of the women there were lesbian, some were bisexual. Everyone was kind of more or less comfortable with that whole topic, so that was a really good place for me to be. And actually, I think the woman who winked at me was part of that organization, so I think that's probably how I got involved in that. And around that same time, I met this guy whose name was Bob, and he told me that he was bisexual, and we were hanging out, and I like developed a crush on him. And while I was developing a crush on him, he was pointing out all the lesbians on campus, and I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. It was very strange until it sort of dawned on me, oh, he's helping me find my people. He's helping me find my community. I really felt like I was bisexual, and I still do feel like I'm bisexual. At this point, I would even say pansexual, because I don't feel all that binary. So if I'm not binary, then the idea of being attracted only to binary people doesn't make any sense anymore. But I felt pressure to come out as a lesbian as opposed to bisexual back then. Everything was very much this or that. There was not a lot of middle ground. And, you know, people were, like, I felt the pressure to kind of be all in, which was always weird to me, because I always felt more like a lesbian than straight anyway. So it wasn't, you know, it's just kind of like, none of it really made a lot of sense, and it still sort of doesn't. So I came out as bisexual, and then I came out as a lesbian, and I told the people in the Great Minds group about the role of quaaludes in my continuing coming out process, which was that I went to a gay bar that was called the Clown's Inn. It was like in a house. It was like in the basement of a house, and you had to climb down these stairs. And I went for a while, and, you know, I met this woman who we had mutual friends, and she was doing a lot of drugs, and so that was cool, because, you know, because I was so nervous. It's like, somebody's relaxed at least. So she was the first woman that I had sex with, and, you know, back then, I think it really had nothing to do with being gay, but just for me, it's like, if you have sex with them, then you're going to spend the rest of your life with them, and it was a rude awakening when I realized that that's not really how it works. So we were together for about 2 weeks. It was amazing, though, because it was like, as scared as I was about the whole idea of coming out, it felt like being home, really. It was just like, this is who I am. The hardest person to tell, I think, was my dad, although I told him that when I came back from college for the holidays. I came out in 1979, and when I went home for the winter holidays, I told him and my stepmother, and I was like, he just didn't really, it's like it was just not in his consciousness at all. And I think, to me, it's not that he had a negative reaction, it's that he was surprised. That threw me off, because, like, I just can't believe that he didn't, on some really obvious level, know that. You know what I mean? But he just, if something wasn't in his direct experience, it just went right past him. He never said anything negative, but he also never said anything positive, or never asked any questions, or just, like, never showed any real interest. My stepmother, on the other hand, was actually kind of entertaining, because, you know, I went into her room, or I went into their room, and I said, I have something to tell you. And she said, you're pregnant. You know, and I said, no. You're getting married. No. You know, it's like she knew what I was going to say, and she was just playing. But one thing that happened, which was really interesting, was that I had a relationship with a man when I was about 37. And it lasted about 6 months, and my dad at the time had terminal cancer, and he was basically in the process of dying. And my boyfriend and I went down to visit my dad and my stepmother in Florida, and that happened basically right around the time when my dad, like, first I think he first asked me if I had a girlfriend, like right around that time, which was just so interesting. The timing of that was so interesting. And then when my boyfriend and I were down there, my dad said something to the effect of, like, now that you're being taken care of, you know, I don't have to worry about you anymore, or something like that. And I chose to look at that positively. If that had happened 10 years earlier, I would have been freaking out with rage at how stupid that is. But from my father's background, he was born in 1920, he grew up during the Depression, you know, his mindset was that men provide security and women, you know, don't have to worry about that stuff so much. I mean, he was in many ways a feminist. I mean, he always supported everything I did, including playing sports and you know, whatever I was interested in, he always supported that. He never said to me, you're a girl, you shouldn't do this or that. I mean, if anything, he expected me to be like the President of the United States. But on a social, cultural level, he was old-fashioned. And, you know, I think in his mind, two women together, how could they support each other? Like, how could they function? That was kind of, I think, where his mind went, because his model was not like that. You know, I just chose to look at it in retrospect. My dad died like 2 weeks after we were down there, and if that helped him die in peace, then I'm okay with that. Even though it was kind of like, I wish my dad was a little more ahead of the curve. You know, it all worked out for the best. You know, I feel like my dad finally became the dad I always wanted when his priorities changed as he was dying. And it is funny that was the last relationship with a man that I ever had, and the first relationship with a man really that I ever had. So the timing was just really interesting. You know, I kind of look at it as just sort of like, it's just something in my evolution. I'm glad that it happened, and I'm glad that it's over, because that's not really the future that I want. I don't want to be in a straight relationship for the rest of my life. You might think that coming out in North Carolina in the late 70s would have been extremely difficult, and it was not the case. It was not the case at all. The only time that I experienced any kind of backlash was the most minor situation where I was with a girlfriend, and it was Halloween, and we were just like walking down Franklin Street, which is the main street in Chapel Hill. I don't remember if we were holding hands, but you know, we weren't wearing costumes or anything, and some smart ass guy said, "Oh, are you dressed up as lesbians?" And it was like, you know, we just kept walking. It's like, there's no point in even responding to such a stupid comment, you know. But it's like, that is as bad as it was in Chapel Hill. I mean, Chapel Hill was the most liberal part of the state of North Carolina, and possibly of the whole South, back in the late 70s. So I didn't have any problems in Chapel Hill, but in New York I've had many more problems, actually. The worst thing that happened was when, let's see, I was about 30 years old, and I was on a date with a woman, and we were in Prospect Park, and we were just walking through the park as it was getting darker, and we were sitting on the steps of the boathouse in Prospect Park, which at that time was empty because it was in the process of being renovated, I think. And we were just sitting there. I think we kissed each other, and then all of a sudden we both became aware that there were like a group of young, like teenage boys who just were like watching us, and they were on this bridge, and they ended up running after us and chasing us out of the park. And if we weren't both in really good shape, I do not know what would have happened, because they really, really wanted to hurt us. And I think they called us dykes or something. I mean, it seemed clear to me that it was triggered by our sexuality. We ran as fast as we possibly could, and we found some police officers. and it's just funny what I remember, because I remember there was at least one of the police officers was female, and she was like cuddling the woman that I was with, and I was just sort of like left to fend for myself, which was just very strange. It's just like, I remember that little detail. It's like, you know, for whatever that's worth, it reminds me of all the bathroom stuff now, because I've gotten that, you know, this is a women's bathroom, what are you doing in here, kind of thing. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, you know, I get called sir, you know, and that, I think even more than my sexuality, it's the gender bending stuff that sets people off. You know, they just can't tolerate a woman who doesn't look like, you know, someone on the cover of a women's magazine. And it's like, sorry, I don't look like that. I don't want to look like that. You know, what does it have to do with you? You know, I feel like on that level I'm coming out again as more gender fluid, and you know, sometimes I like to wear nail polish and lipstick, and sometimes I like to wear a baseball cap, and sometimes I do both at the same time, and it's like, that's who I am, that's the way it is. So yeah, but you know, for the most part, other than a few people on the street and that one incident, I've been really fortunate, you know, and I do want to say that I feel like it's partly my responsibility and all of our responsibility to make it safe for the people who can't say that, you know, especially like trans women of color, to me, is the group that is the most targeted, and I feel like I want to do whatever I can to prevent that kind of violence, because, you know, yeah, it didn't happen to me, but it's happening to people in my community, and it shouldn't be happening to anybody, and it certainly shouldn't be happening now after all the progress that we've made. So yeah, you know, fast forward to now, my work is in the LGBT+ community, because it's where I belong. You know, this is my tribe, these are my people, and if my telling this story can help any one person to be more comfortable, or to, you know, to hang in when things are tough, then, you know, my life is a success. That's it.
Yeah.